How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Zayin, Daf 77 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, today, what's this? Today we finished the seventh, the seventh parak of Masechta Menachos. I don't anticipate it's going to be too long of a daf. I hope, honestly, it wasn't such a difficult daf, which was really good because it's Friday afternoon. And last night they changed the clock, which means I lost an hour last night. But Shabbos starts an hour later, which is really helpful. But I managed to learn and review the whole daf today, so it wasn't a particularly difficult daf, which is amazing. I need a daf like this in the middle of the week so that I could try to get ahead again. I'm always trying to get ahead. I'm telling you, Kachim is not a note to self. Kachim is not a good time to fall behind. Anyways, it'll be very difficult to catch up. Hapanim. So today we talk about the number of loaves in Menachos, right? So we've referenced this concept in the past. So of course, several of the korban minchas are come with loaves, whether they're machvas or marcheshes or chalas and rekikins, whatever it might be. Masha lo yeh. There's also, of course, Lechem Hapanim, lachmei toda, Minchas chavitin, lachmei nazir, all sorts of things. So we're going to discuss how many loaves come with each of these menachos, and then we get to another two mishnayos that discuss the Omer, Shtei, Lechem, and Lechem Hapanim, and kind of different details of their preparation. So, friends, this is what we have ahead of us for Daf Ayin Zayin of Masechta Menachos. Let's go get it. Friends, our journey begins. Wait, did I say Ayin Zayin? I don't know. Ayin Vav. What have I been saying? Have I been saying Ayin Vav or Ayin Zayin? We're learning Daf Ayin Vav of Masechta Menachos. Now, friends, we begin at the very top of Daf Ayin Vav of Masechta Menachos. Kol HaMenachos at the Mishnah to Unis Shlosh Meos Shifa v'Chomish Meos Be'ita. Okay, a little bit of a interesting concept that I can't say I know. I feel like I'd love to see somebody do this, and then I can kind of get it. But the mincha needs to be rubbed. It needs to be rubbed 300 times, and like hit almost like kneaded 500 times. Okay, be'ita. Where am I? 300 rubs, 500 pounds. Shifa uveita bechitin, and the rubbing and pounding is when they are wheat, in order to like loosen up. I think like the any stuff that we want to loosen up. Rabbi Yossi says that it's talking about the dough. That's the dough that you kind of rub between your hands and kind of knead and use like your palms and stuff to apply pressure to the dough. Okay, so somehow we're like applying pressure, whether it's to the grains themselves or to the dough that's made from them. Okay, this is done 300 times with the rubbing and 500 times with the pounding. Kol amenachos bos eser. All menachos are 10 loaves each. Chutz milechem hapanim v'chavite kohen gadol. The two exceptions being the lechem hapanim, the 12 showbreads, and the minchas chavitin of the kohen gadol. The lechem hapanim and the minchas chavitin were each she'em bos shtem esrei, that they are 12 loaves each. Div Rabbi Yehuda, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer, as Rabbi Meir disagrees, and he says kulam bos shtem esrei nisht. All menachos are 12 loaves each. The exceptions being chutz mi chalos toda, except for chalos toda v'nizirus shein bos eser. The exceptions being the 4 types of lachmei toda. There are 10 of each type for a total of 40, and also a nazir when he is done naziring, so he brings 10 chalas and 10 rekikin. So 10 of each. But other than that, there will be 12 of each loaf for every other type of mincha, according to Reb Meir. Gewaldig. Let me chop a stick of water and we go weiter. Says the Gemara. Tana, we learn in a Braisa, Shaf achas boyet shtayim, shav shtayim boyet shalosh. Okay, so very interesting. So we said that there would be 3 rubbings and 5 poundings. So what they would do is 1 rub, 2 pounds, 2 rubs, 3 pounds, right? Because if you do 1, 2, and then you add 2 and 3 respectively, so you end up with 3 and 5, right? If you have, let's say, 1 pound, 1 rub, 2 pounds, and then you add another 2 rubs and another 3 pounds. So you sachakol, you have 3 rubs, 5 pounds, and then you start over. 1 rub, 2 pounds, 2 rubs, 3 pounds, another 3 to 5. So if you do that 100 times, you get 300 rubs, 500 pounds. Azoy. Now, by Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to know, Amtui va'asuye echad, or dilma amtui va'asuye trei, my teku. When it comes to rubbing, when you rub 1/4 and then back, is that considered 2 rubs or 1 rub? It's a tie. Shifa uve'ita bechitin, Rabbi Yossi Omer bebatzek. The rubbing and pounding is with the actual kernels of wheat, whereas Rabbi Yossi says it's with the dough. They ask bebatzek v'lo bechitin or dilma af bebatzek. When Rabbi Yossi says the dough, is he acknowledging, like the Chachamim, that you also need to do this for the grains themselves and also for the dough, or only the dough? Tashma, that would be a lot of rubbing and pounding if you had to do it 300 and 500 times for the kernels, for the grains, as well as for the dough. Sheesh. Tashma Kamanir Desanya, we're learning about Shifa uve'ita bechitin. Tanakama says that rubbing and pounding is for the grains, whereas Rabbi Yossi Omer Shifa uve'ita bebatzek, no, it's for the dough. I.e., he disagrees with the Tanakama and says specifically for the dough. I'm going to grab a shtickle more water and then we will go weiter. Okay, now we are going to be discussing how many loaves are offered with each mincha. Okay, we said that all the menachos are 10 loaves each, with the 2 exceptions being the Lechem Hapanim and the Minchas Chavitim, which are 12 each. Lechem Hapanim behedriksiv, it specifically says by the Lechem Hapanim, by the 12 showbreads. I'll read you the pasuk. Ve'lakachta soles, take fine flour, ve'afisa osa Shtei mesrei chales, and you'll make 12 showbreads. Shnei asonim yiyeh ha'chelek ha'chalo ha'achas, each showbread being 2 isarons, so for a total of 24 isarons, but there are 12 show breads. So Lechem Hapanim be'edrik sibbe Chavite kohen gadol asir chuka chuka, and we learn out Gzeir Shavet says chok by Minchas Chavitin as well as by Lechem Hapanim, and therefore Milechem Hapanim. Okay, so and therefore just like the Lechem Hapanim is 12 breads, so are the Minchas Chavitin. The Minchas Chavitin are 12 loaves. Minchas Chavitin, of course, being the mincha of the kohen gadol that was offered half in the morning, half in the afternoon. Menachos, where am I? Kol menachos debos eser minolan. According to Rabbi Yehuda, all menachos other than the Shtei Lechem, other than the Lechem Hapanim and Minchas Chavitin, all of the other menachos are 10 loaves each. How come? Gomar milachmei Torah. Because they are, all other menachos are learned from the breads of the Toda, which are 10 each. Malohalan eser, afkan eser. Just like by the Toda, we're talking about 10 loaves each. So also by all other menachos, we're talking about 10 loaves per mincha. Ve'leilif milechem apanim. Why learn out from the Toda? Lachmei Toda. Why not learn out from the showbreads, the 12 showbreads? Malal and Shtei Mesrei, Afkan Shtei Mesrei. Just like there are 12 showbreads, maybe there should be 12 loaves by each mincha. I'll tell you why. Mistaba milachmei Toda avle lemelav, because it makes more sense to learn out all nidavis, right? All minchas nidavas, right? When a person says, "I'm going to bring a minchas machvas, macheshes, etc., etc., etc.," to be learned out from the lachmei Toda rather than from the showbreads. Shekain yochid, because lachmei Toda as well as minchas nidavas are offered by individuals rather than the Lechem Hapanim, which is a communal thing. Hamisnadev, it can be, right, both the Lachmei Toda as well as the Minchas Nedavas are volunteered. You say, hey, I'm going to bring this, as opposed to the showbreads, which are a weekly thing, every week in the Beis HaMikdash. Shemen, they both require oil. The showbreads do not. Nifsal, they can both become pasul belino. Both a korban tamid as well as a minchas nedava needs to be offered by the nighttime, otherwise it becomes pasul belino. Whereas the showbreads are baked in advance and they sit in the heichal for over a week. Shelo b'Shabbos v'shelo b'tumah, and finally the toda and the minchas nedava, they cannot be offered on Shabbos because they're individual korbanos, and they are not offered b'tumah either. So for those reasons, we learn out the minchas nedava from the Lachmei Toda rather than the showbreads. Adrab Lechem Hapanim have the Melech nisht. I'll argue that the minchas nedava should be learned out from the showbreads, from the Lechem Hapanim, because shekain hekdish, because both of them are kodesh kodashim, right? All menachos are kadshe kodshim. So are the showbreads. Masha ein ken, according to this kachim kalim. Vilevona, the showbreads as well as the minchas nedava require frankincense. Masha ein ken the toda. Matzah, the showbreads as well as the minchas nedava are unleavened, as opposed to the toda, which has 10 chametz loaves. The etzem, and also they come on their own, as opposed to the lachmei toda are only brought together with the korban toda. Hanach nefishin, to which the Gemara answers, if you're counting, if you're keeping score, there were 6 commonalities between the minchas nedava and the lachmei toda, as opposed to only 4 between the minchas nedava and the lechem hapanim, and therefore, because there are more similarities to the lachmei toda, so therefore it is learned from the lachmei toda, and there are 10 loaves each when it comes to minchas nedava, as opposed to 12. More water. Now, says the Gemara, V'sviralon, davar lamed b'gzeira shaveh, chozom lamed b'binyanab, and if we hold that something that's learned from a gzeira shaveh can then teach via binyanav. Reb Neil, was this one of your sugyas, Reb Neil? Davar lamed b'gzeira shaveh, chozom lamed b'binyanav. I always forget. If it wasn't this sugya, it was an adjacent sugya. This was one of the sugyas, a very intense sugya, and it spoke to Reb Neil's heart. I can understand why. I can relate. Reb Neil, I think we have similar hearts. It's a beautiful thing, Davar lamed b'gzeira shaveh, chozom lamed b'binyanav. It really is a very beautiful thing. Let's go weiter. So if we hold that something that's learned from a gzeira shaveh can then teach via a binyanav, i.e., how do we know that the minchas chavitin bichlal is 12 loaves? Well, that's learned from a gzeira shaveh from the lechem hapanim. Okay, gewaltig. So we learn from a gzeira shaveh. Lechem hapanim, it says chok. Minchas chavitin, it says chok. So therefore, by minchas chavitin also it's 12. Well, now that we know that minchas chavitin is 12, maybe now we could say, well, just like minchas chavitin is 12, maybe the minchas nedava should also be 12. So let's learn out the minchas nedava from the minchas chavitin then. Ma lohalon Shtei Avkan Shtei, just like minchas chavitin is 12, so minchas nedava should be 12 loaves. Avkan Shtei mistav milachmei toda avalei lemelef. No, makes more sense to learn out minchas nedava from lachmei toda because she can't hedge it, because anybody could bring a korban toda or minchas nedava. Minchas chavitin is only the kohen gadol. She hisnadev, you can donate these korbanos. Masha enken, you can't just bring a minchas chavitin. Chatzoyin, also they are not offered in halves, whereas the minchas chavitin is. Lefigel, they can become pigel, but the minchas chavitin doesn't become pigel because there's nothing that becomes permitted. Right? Pigel is only when there's something that becomes permitted. Right? But the lachmei toda, there's eating the korban. Same thing by the minchas nedava. There's the shiraim. Masha enke, by the minchas chavitin, there's no pigel. Shelo b'Shabbos v'shelo b'tumah, and also, as we said earlier, the Korban Toda and the Minchas Nedava cannot be offered on Shabbos and cannot be offered B'tumah. Masha'enke in the Minchas Chavitin. Adarabba, punkt fakert. Now, Chever, if this time you're keeping score, there were 6 commonalities between the Toda and the Minchas Nedava. We're going to see that there are 8 commonalities between the Minchas Nedava and the Minchas Chavitin. We should have learned from Chavite Kohen Gadol. Shekain Isaron. Chavite Kohen Gadol is an Isaron, and the Minchas Nedava is also by default an Isaron. Now, Masha'ein Kain, the Lachmei Toda are 20 Esroinim. Kli, also they become Kadosh Bikli Sharis. Masha'ein Kain, the Lachmei Toda, the Shchita of the Korban Toda is what's Mikadesh, the breads. Hekdesh, they're Kodesh Kodashim, Kodesh Kodshim, as opposed to the Toda, which is Kodshim Kalim. Vilevona, they both require Levona. Masha'ein Kain, the Toda, there's no Levona there. Matzah, they are both matzahs, unleavened. The Toda, there is chametz. Ve'etzem, the Minchas Chavitin and the Minchas Nedava are brought on their own. Masha'ein Kain, the Lachmei Toda are brought together with the Korban Toda. Hagasha, both the Minchas Chavitin and the Minchas Nedava require being brought to the Mizbeach. Ve'ishim, and they are burnt on the Mizbeach. Neither of those, Hagasha, Ishim, are not by the Korban Toda. V'hanin Efishin, and we just gave 8 similarities between the Minchas Nedava and the Minchas Chavitin, as opposed to 6 with the Toda. Nonetheless, Hedjit Mejit Adifle, still, Reb Yehuda would prefer to learn out a Hedjit from a Hedjit, a Korban Toda, which anybody could bring, and Minchas Nedava, which anybody could bring, as opposed to Minchas Chavitin, which only the Kohen Gadol could bring. So we're not going to learn out from the Kohen, something that only the Kohen Gadol could bring. If we could learn out from something that anybody could bring, just like the Minchas Nedava, anybody could bring. But Meir Omer, Kulan Boz Shtei, says Rav Meir that 12. So Rav Meir disagrees with Rav Yehuda and says that it is 12 loaves per, right, when it comes to Minchas. The only exceptions being the Toda and the Nazir, where there are 10 loaves each, but otherwise we're talking about 12 loaves each. Micah Sover, I'll tell you, either if he holds that something that's learned from Gzer Shava, i.e. Minchas Chavitin, can then teach as a Binyanav, just like Minchas Chavitin is 12, so also all other Minchas are 12 loaves. So great, so Yolif Michavitin to Kohen Gadol, so we'll learn from the Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, Tani Nefishan, because as we said earlier, at the end of the day, there are more similarities between the Minchas Nedava and the Minchas Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol. We said that there are 8 as opposed to only 6 similarities with the Korban Toda. Rabbi Yehuda said that nonetheless we prefer to learn out Hedjit from Hedjit, but Rabbi Meir disagrees and says no, there are more similarities with the Minchas Chavitin, so we should learn from there and say 12 loaves each. And if you hold, however, that something that's learned from Gzer Shava, i.e. the 12 loaves of the Minchas Chavitin, cannot then teach about other Menachos, well then, Yalif mi Lechem Hapanim, fine, so we'll learn out from Lechem Hapanim, Hektish Mektish Adivle, that Reb Meir prefers to learn out Kodesh Kodshim from Kodesh Kodshim, Lechem Hapanim, well, Minchas Nedava from Lechem Hapanim, both are Kodesh Kodshim, as opposed to Korban Toda, which is only Kodshim Kalim, and therefore that would be preferred to learn out from Lechem Hapanim, even though there are more similarities to the Korban Toda, right? There were 6 similarities to the Korban Toda, as opposed to only 4 with Lechem Hapanim, but still Kodesh Kodshim, right? The Lechem Hapanim and the Minchas Nedava are both Kodesh Kodshim, and therefore that's a stronger bond. More water. Moving on. Chutz mi lachme toda v'nezirus. Now, Reb Meir said that 12 loaves per mincha, the 2 exceptions being the 10 loaves each for the lachme toda and the 10 loaves each for the lachme nazir. Shehein bows eser, there's 10 each. Lachme toda behedja ksivu. It says explicitly 10 loaves each by Lachmei Toda, which apparently we are going to learn on tomorrow's daf about. It's not, I think it's just not so simple. It's like a limud. Nizirus, and when it comes to the Nizirus, the Omer Shlomav, by Korban Toda, it says Zevach Todas Shlomav, L'Rabba Shami Nazir, Shlomav is plural to include also the Shlomim of a Nazir, i.e. that just like the loaves of the 10 loaves, well, just like the loaves of the Toda are 10 each, also the loaves of the Nazir, when he is bringing his Shlomim, it is 10 Chalas and 10 Rikikin. Omer of Tuvi Bar Kisna, Omer Shmuel, Lachme Toda, Shafon Arba Chalas Yotza. So says Shmuel that even though, well, let's go by there for a second. Don't we need 40 lemitzvah? Even though really, as we know by Korban Torah, there are 40 loaves, 4 types, 10 of each type, 40 loaves. Even so, that's just, milichatchila. Preferably, yeah, of course you should have 40. But if all you had was 4, 1 of each, that is sufficient. But 1 second, we know that there are 40 loaves, 10 of each of 4 types. So there are 4 types of breads by a Toda, 10 of each one, 1 of each type, so 1 out of the 10 of each of the 4 types. So 1 of 10 times 4, so a total of 4 breads, goes to the kohen. You take 1 of each type of bread and give that to the kohen. But if all you have is a total of 4 breads, then what are you going to give to the kohen? And if you're going to say, oh, no problem, just break off, right? Bring 4 breads, 1 of each type, and just break off part and give a piece to the kohen. Echad Omer Achmana. Yeah, but it says you give to the kohen one whole one, not a shtickle. Shlo yitol parus. That you don't take a piece and give it to him. That for shinu belisha. Okay, yeah, but nonetheless, you'd have to kind of know in advance, and as you're baking the breads and you're kneading the dough, you would at that point separate it so that it would be kind of its own separate unit. Not that you're like cutting off a piece from a bread, but rather you're removing it when it had pre-bake. Meisvei, we have, however, a contradiction. When it comes to menachos, right? We said that there are supposed to be 10 loaves each, or this is according to, well, yeah, these are toda, whatever it is. Let's say, let's just assume 10 loaves each. Anyways, it's a korban toda, right? So 10 loaves each. So let's say, however, you made big geschmacka loaves. But because you made big geschmacka loaves, there wasn't enough dough for 10, so you made 7 or 8. Or maybe you made little itsy-pitsy loaves, and therefore you only ran out of dough after 15 loaves. Because they're small little benkelach. Is that what they're called? Benkelach? No, a benkel I think is like a stool. What are they called? But are they also called benkelas? What are those little my great grandmother used to say chali. Those little chalis. What are they also called benkelach? Benkelach? Those little rolls. A benkelach. I don't know if anybody knows. Let us know. Hapanim. So where were we? Right. Okay. So if you make them really big, which means that you have less than them, they're bigger but there are less of them, or you made them smaller, so they're smaller but there are more of them, no problem, it's kosher. Chutz milechem hapanim, except for lechem hapanim v'chaviti kohen gadol. Except for lechem hapanim, those have to be 12. You can't have less but bigger, more but smaller. No, they need to be 12. V'lachmei toda v'naziris, but also the lachmei toda and the naziris, they have to be the correct amount. By lachmei toda and naziris, everyone agreed that would be 10. So you have to have 10 each. You can't have 4. So who? Domer ki Tana. However, Shmuel says like the following Tana, the Sanya that we learned in the Brisa called Menachos sheriba b'midas chalason o shemiat b'midas chalason. Okay, whenever you have bigger chalas, smaller chalas, ksheris, it's kosher. Chutz milechem hapanim v'chavite kohen gadol, except for just the lechem hapanim and chavite kohen gadol, those have to be 12 each. V'yesh omda, those who say av lachmei toda v'naziros, also lachmei toda and naziros have to be 10 each. However, according to Tanakama, they don't have to be 10 each. And Shmuel holds like that Tanakama that it doesn't have to be 10 each, it can even just be 4. Omer Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Minchas Maife, when it comes to a Minchas Maife, Sonushe Afa, Chala Achas, that instead of 10 chalas, you just have one chala. Yotza, you are yotze. My time, how come matzahs ksiv? Because by the minchas, my fetoner, it says matzahs singular. It says v'chisakav mincha, according mincha, my fetoner, soles chalos, matzos, but matzos is written without a vav, matzas, which is singular, so it can even just be one. Ma'askef Rav Papa says 1 second. The reason why it can only be one is because it says matzas singular. Time of the chaziv, dichsiv matzas, or ksiv matzos, lo, but if it would have said plural, if it would have been written with a vav, plural, so then you wouldn't be able to offer just one. But v'gabi lach metoda, but by the korban toda dichsiv matzos with a vav. V'amar of Tuvi bar Kisna, Amar Shmuel lach metoda shafon arba chalos yotza. But 1 second, by toda it says matzos with a vav, and based on what you're saying, Rav Huna, if it's plural, you should have to have all 10. And yet by the toda, it's written with a vav, which is plural. And yet, Shmuel had said you can just bring 4, it's sufficient. Ha'i pliga, enachinami. Enachinami, it's a machlekes tanoim. Yeah, Rav Huna would not agree with that. And that's okay. Rav Huna's a Amora, and so is Shmuel. And they disagree. Rav Huna would say if matzos is written plural, you'd have to have all of them, whereas Shmuel disagrees because by Toda, even though it's written plural, Shmuel still says 4 is sufficient. Friends, now we move on to the next section of today's daf, preparing the Omer. Shtei Lechem. Lechem Hapanim. Says the next Mishnah, Omer, when it comes to the Minchas Omer that we learned all about in the previous parak. Can you imagine? We're already done with this parak. Hayaba Isaron Mishalosh Sayin. So as we learned about in the previous parak, the Minchas Omer, they would harvest three sa'as. According to another opinion, was 5 sa'as. But anyways, the Chum's opinion was that it would be 3 sa'as. 3 sa'as was an ephah. And from 3 sa'as, they would get 1 isaron of flour for the Omer. Shtei Halechem, Shtei esronim mi shalosh sa'in. By the Shtei Halechem, they also would have 3 sa'as of wheat, right? So by the Omer, they would harvest 3 sa of barley. By the Shtei Lechem, they would harvest 3 sa of wheat. The difference is that by the Omer, they would have from 3 sa of barley, they would produce 1 isaron of flour. By the Shtei Lechem, from 3 sa of wheat, they would produce 2 isarons of flour, so twice as much from the same amount, right? 3 sa'as of barley for 1 isa of flour, 3 sa of wheat for 2 isarons of flour. Now, Lechem Hapanim, when it comes to the showbreads, there were 12 showbreads, esrim va'arba esronim me esrim va'arba sa'in. They would harvest 24 sa'as of wheat for the 12 showbreads, and from the 24 sa'as, they would get 24 isarons. Each showbread was 2 esronim, 2 isarons. My time, how come by the Omer, 3 sa'as of barley resulted in just 1 isaron of flour? The answer is because there were 2 kind of challenges there. Kevan de mechadash asi. Challenge number 1 is that you're working with chadash wheat, which is more moist, it's more fresh, it's not as dry, and therefore it's more difficult to extract fine flour from the new wheat. And additionally, umisaorin asi. Barley is more difficult to work with than wheat is. So you got 2 kind of challenges there. 1 is that you're working with chadash, 2 is that you're working with barley. And that is why isaron mufcher lo asi el mishalosh sayin. And that is why it requires so much barley, 3 isarons of barley, just to get 1 great isaron of flour. Now, Shtei Halechem, when it comes to Shtei Halechem, Shtei esronim mishalosh sayin. So from 3 sa'a of wheat, you get 2 isarons of fine flour. Came to mechitin asan, because since they're coming from wheat, afalgav de mechadash asan, even though it's chadash. So on the one hand, the Shtei Halechem, we're working with chadash grain, but it's wheat grain. So even though it's chadash, it is wheat. So Shtei esronim also mishalosh sayin, you can manage to extract 2 esronim of fine flour from the same 3 sa'as, right? So by the Omer, it's not only is it chadash, it's also barley. Therefore, it requires 3 sa'as just for 1 isaron. When it comes to the Shtei Lechem, even though it's chadash, it is, however, wheat, which is easier to work with, and therefore from 3 sa'as you can get 2 isarons. Lechem Hapanim esrim va'arba esronim me esrim va'arba soin. When it comes, however, to the showbreads, they were able to extract 1 isaron per sa'ah. Okay, so when it came to the Shtei Lechem, they were able to extract 1 isaron per sa'ah in a half. When it came to the showbreads, they were able to extract 1 isaron per sa'ah. So from 24 sa'ahs, they got 24 isarons, which was enough for 12 showbreads. Each showbread was 2 isarons. My time Halechem came into mechitin asu, since the showbreads were wheat, and also umiyashan asu, they weren't working with new grain for the showbreads. So because it was older wheat and since it was older and it was wheat, so therefore isaron muvcha asu misa, they were able to extract an excellent isaron from 1 sa'ah. From each sa'ah, they were able to get an excellent isaron. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol menachos sheriba b'midas esronon, o shemiyat b'midas esronon. When it comes to a mincha, the isaron of the mincha has to be exact. Right? They would have isaron measuring cups. You're able to measure an exact amount. You don't want a heaping scoop, nor do you want to be so aggressive in evening out the scoop that you actually take away from the scoop. You want an even scoop, just 1 complete isaron. So if it is too much or too little, psulos. Riba b'midas sa'in shelain, or shemiyat b'midas sa'in shelain ksheres. However, when it comes to, for example, the Omer, if you didn't harvest 3 sa'as, you harvested 4 or 2. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What's important is that you have an isaron. What's important is that the end result is an isaron of fine flour. If you harvest more than you need, great. If you harvest less than you need, okay, it's possible. Okay, see if you can manage to get what you need, the isaron of fine flour, then great. The 3 isarons is not hard, fast rule. It's just sort of normally what would be necessary to get. Right, the 3 sa'as is normally what's necessary to get the isaron that you need. But the 3 sa'as is not super important. What is super important is the 1 isaron that needs to be a full isaron, no more, no less. Says the Mishnah, new Mishnah, Omer menupa b'shlosh esrei napa. The Omer would be sifted with 13 sieves. Shtei Halechem, the Shtei Lechem b'shteim esrei. The wheat for the Shtei Lechem would be sifted with 12 sieves. Lechem Hapanim b'yud aleph, and the showbreads would be sifted with 11 sieves. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon, I think we're going to understand this specifically referring to the showbreads. Lo haya loin kitzpa, you didn't actually need the 11 sieves for the showbreads. Elasolis minupa kol tzarka haya, maybe you could just buy and bring for the showbreads fine flour, and then you don't need to do all the sifting in the base. Hamikdash Shneimar, as the pasuk says, by the showbreads v'lakachta soles, you could purchase fine flour, vafisa osa, shetei menupa kol tzarka, that you can then just buy, you could bring fine flour and bake it, and as long as it is fine enough flour, you don't actually have to do all the sifting and stuff yourself in the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, bedaka begasa, a fine sieve, a coarse sieve, a fine sieve, a coarse sieve. Let's go weiter for a second. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Omer says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, shlosh esrei napos ayu b'mikdash, there were 13 sieves in the Beis HaMikdash, zo l'mayla mizo, each one either finer or coarser than the other. V'zo l'mayla mizo, elyona kolet esubin. Okay, the highest one, the coarsest one would be for catching the thick bran or whatever the thick stuff that you needed to get rid of. Tachtona kolet soles, and the bottom would collect fine flour and would remove the like dust that was in there. So basically, what would happen is with these 13 sieves, I saw a note in the art school that explained it. So with these 13 sieves, so basically the finest of all the sieves, the roll was its roll, right? You didn't want dust, right? You don't want dust. You want fine flour, which is just the perfect flour. So the finest of the sieves would filter out the like dust, like stuff that you don't want, and the coarsest of the sieves would filter out stuff that's too coarse. And what you would do is you would start with the finest of the sieves, and you would filter out like dust. And then you would go, so there were 13 sieves. So you would start with number 1 being the finest, number 13 being the coarsest. So you would start with number 1, filter out some dust. Then you would go to 13, and you would put it through there, and that would filter out mamish like the coarsest stuff. Then you go to number 2, and it would filter out the next level of 2 fine stuff. Then you'd go to number 12, and it would filter out the next level. And then you go 3, 11, 4, 10, 5, 9, 6, 8, and then you'd get to 7, and I guess whatever was left after the final sift was the perfect balance. Whatever was too thin was already balanced, was already separated, and whatever was too thick was also already separated, and what you are left with at the end is your solas. Now, according to Tanakama though, apparently I guess you would be able to accomplish whatever you need to accomplish with simply 2 sieves. I guess a coarser one and a finer one, and I guess you do the fine, the coarse, fine, coarse until you got the right. I guess that would be able to also filter out whatever needed to filter out over time. Okay. And finally, Tanu Rab Shimon Omer Lo Ayla and Kizba. Rab Shimon said that when it came to the showbreads, you didn't need the 11 sieves. Rather, Tanu Rabbanan the Rabbi thought soles v'afisa. The pasuk says that you bake fine flour. V'afisa osam lamet nikachas soles, that you can buy soles and you can purchase soles. You don't need to use all the 11 sieves. Uminayin shafilu chitin. How do you know that actually you can even buy? You don't have to buy fine flour. You can even buy wheat and sift it yourself in the Beis Hamikdash. Talmud lomar v'lo kachta, that you shall purchase mikol makom. Even just regular wheat, even that it's not been made into fine flour. We'll explain this in a minute. Is it possible that even by other menachos you could just buy wheat? Talmud lomar osa. No, specifically the Shtei Lechem. We'll explain this in a minute. But because out of concern to save money. What does it mean to save money? Omer says the Torah has mercy on the money of the Yidden. How do we know this? It says when Moshe Rabbeinu when he hit the rock, it says that, and you will give to drink the assembly and also all of their animals and stuff that the Torah takes into consideration, not just the Am Yisrael but also their money. Now, what is going on here? Money, Am Yisrael, what? Basically, the Lechem Hapanim, the showbreads, were offered every single week. And there were 12, it was 20, right? Normally a Minchas Chavitin, for example, was 1 Yisarun. The showbreads were 24 Esronim, 24 Yisaruns. And they were every single week. So most menachos, so the Minchas Chavitin happens to be every day. Although I think we said that the Kohen Gadol brings his own Minchas Chavitin. But other menachos that are offered, they're not necessarily offered as often and they're not so substantial. The Lechem Hapanim, the showbreads, were 24 Yisaruns and they were every single week. And if we were to buy fine flour, I mean, ideally you would buy fine flour, right? That's the best. You go to the best mill in town, and you have the professionals. They'll make you beautiful fine flour. You bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. It's amazing, but it's gonna be expensive. So because this is coming from the public funds, so we don't want to spend more money than we need to. So therefore, specifically by the Lechem Hapanim, because it's such an expense and it'll add up over time. So you could just buy wheat and grind it yourself in the Beis Hamikdash and grind it yourself for the Lechem Hapanim. However, for the showbreads. However, when it comes to, for example, if I'm going to bring a Minchas Nedava, so then I can't just bring regular wheat and start grinding it. No, if I'm going to bring a Minchas Nedava, I have to bring fine flour with me to the Beis Hamikdash. So we can read it again. Right? So you can buy soles for the showbreads, right? But you can even buy just regular wheat. You could buy for the showbreads, buy even just regular wheat. That's fine. Is it possible that anybody who brings a korban mincha could just bring regular wheat? No, specifically by the showbreads. you could bring regular wheat, but anybody else who's bringing a mincha would bring fine flour. Would bring fine flour to the Beis Hamikdash because we're concerned about the showbreads being a lot of isarins of flour and adding up over time. Friends, that was Daf Ayin Vav of Masechta Menachos. On Daf Ayin Vav, on Daf 76 of Masechta Menachos, we learned about the number of loaves in Menachos. We saw the machlokes between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda had said that in general we're talking about 10 loaves per mincha, the two exceptions being the Lechem Hapanim and the Minchas Chavitim, which were 12 loaves each. Reb Meir disagreed and he says, no, all Menachos are 12 loaves each. The only exceptions being the Lachmei Toda and the Lachmei Nazir. They are 10 each. And then we got to two more Mishnayos that discussed the Minchas Omer, the Shtei Lechem, and the Lechem Hapanim. How many sa'a of barley, wheat do we need in order to get, whether it's 1 isaron, 2 esronim, 24 esronim, however much we need for each korban. So how much sa'a of grain we had to start with. And then we also discussed the sieves and how all of the grain was made into flour in the Beis Hamikdash. Friends, that was Daf Ayin, and with that we finished the 7th parak of Masechta Menachos. Tomorrow I will catch you to begin the 8th parak of Masechta Menachos. Have a good one. Cheers.